Give it like 1 minute for folks to come in. Welcome, everyone. Ooh, there's so many people piling in. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. While we're waiting to get started and while we're waiting for more folks to join, feel free to drop your name and where you're calling from in the chat, and we'll get started in a couple minutes.
Is the chat disabled, Malika?
Is it? Uh-oh. It shouldn't be. Give me 1 second. One second, folks. Okay, the chat should be working. Yes, so many people. Chicago, Minnesota, NYC, New Jersey. Great. So if you're just joining, welcome in. Please go ahead and drop your name and where you're calling from this evening. I wish there was a way to like pin that in the chat for people. Okay, well, we're a couple of minutes after, so why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to thank all of you for taking this time this evening to hop on this call. My name is Malika. I'm a program specialist at Women's March, and I'm super excited for the discussion that we have lined up for you all tonight on the Equal Rights Amendment. And in light of the presidential election outcome and the urgent need to get organized, we're revamping our mass organizing calls, and we'll now be having these discussions biweekly. And I'm sure, as you all know, it's extremely important now more than ever to find a political home and a place to organize. And we hope that through these calls and the various topics that we'll be discussing, you all will find something to latch onto that interests you and that you can commit to organizing on. So tonight, our discussion topic is the Equal Rights Amendment. And we are joined by Claudia Nachega, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Young Feminist Party, and Sophia Arman, who is the Director of the Feminist Front. Claudia and Sophia will be giving us some background context about what the ERA is and how the organizations are calling for it to be published by President Biden before he leaves office, and what we all can do to help. And then we'll have a little bit of space at the end for some questions and answers. So before I pass it on to our panelists, I want to remind you all that this webinar is being recorded and it will be live streamed to Facebook and posted on our YouTube channel. The Q&A and chat functions are available for you all to use throughout the call. Please make sure to post questions as much as possible in the Q&A box. If you post them in the chat, they will get lost. But also, please be mindful of your language in the chat. We do have people monitoring the chat for trollish behavior. So if we see anything inappropriate, anything transphobic, or other inappropriate language, you will be removed expeditiously. So please keep it cute and respectful, and let's all try to have a good, informative time. I'm also going to quickly go over our community agreements, and I'm dropping a link to these agreements in the chat for you all to review as well. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to read these out loud. Our community, our working community agreements. Number one, we are committed to creating a brave space, not what is often called a safe space. We take care of ourselves and each other. We do what we need to stay present, grounded, and focused, and extend that support and care for the whole group. We are self-reflective and rigorous. We commit to ongoing reflection, curiosity, and work. Some of us have a degree in the school called life, and some of us have academic degrees. And we aim to share information and create space where it doesn't matter which you have or if you have both. We practice understanding how our lives and issues are connected and intersectional. And we work to ensure everyone is and feels welcome in our space, regardless of race, gender, sexual identity, age, class, status, and ability. We oppose any discrimination and bigotry of any kind. We pay attention to how we use our voice and space so everyone can have a voice. We honor different learning styles and experiences. This is not a classroom. There are no prizes for being first or best. And lastly, we commit to moving ideas and principles into action. We are practitioners, not perfectionists. Okay, so that is it on housekeeping. Claudia and Sophia, I'm going to pass it to you to start us off. And I'd love if we can start by talking about what the ERA is, a little bit of background and historical context for our participants who might not be as familiar with this topic, and then maybe a little bit of information about the timeline and why it hasn't been published yet, why it's so difficult to get it published.
Amazing. Okay. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for having us on this call and for organizing this call on the Equal Rights Amendment. My name is Claudia Nechega, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Young Feminist Party, that is the Young People's Movement to finalize the Equal Rights Amendment. And I'm going to briefly explain to you what the Equal Rights Amendment is. So for some of the older folks on the call, you guys are probably already familiar with the ERA. For some of the younger folks on the call, you guys might not know what it is. You might have heard about it in your history class, or maybe you heard about it from the Young Feminist Party. Maybe you heard about it from the social media post from Women's March. But essentially, the Equal Rights Amendment is a proposed constitutional amendment that would enshrine sex equality in the Constitution. Essentially, it would prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex explicitly in one of our nation's most foundational documents. The Equal Rights Amendment is 24 words. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. It's very short, it's very simple, and we have a hell of a lot to do to win the Equal Rights Amendment. So the Equal Rights Amendment was introduced almost a century ago, almost 100 years ago, by Alice Paul. And throughout the decades and this century, we've been fighting for the ERA, sex equality, including gender equality in our Constitution for far too long. The ERA was ratified in 2020 by 38 states. Virginia was the last state to ratify. And in the 1970s, the ERA was passed by an overwhelming majority of Congress in order to become a constitutional amendment. So basically, just to preface, Article 5 of the Constitution only lays out two requirements for a constitutional amendment to become a constitutional amendment. The ERA has met both of those requirements. It's been ratified by 38 states, and it's been passed by a supermajority of Congress. Now, here's the little caveat. A lot of the people in Congress decided that, hey, why don't we just put a deadline on your constitutional equality? Because that's such a great idea, and there's nothing problematic with that at all. So they decided to do that. And that deadline was placed in the 1980s. Unfortunately, while the ERA was passed by Congress, it didn't reach the necessary 38 states by that deadline, but deadlines be damned. Any constitutional legal scholar that is hip to the ERA today and the modern ERA movement understands that for all intents and purposes, the ERA has fulfilled the two necessary requirements explicitly stated in the Constitution to be a constitutional amendment. For all intents and purposes, the ERA is a 28th Amendment. Now, how do we actually get it into the Constitution, and why isn't it in the Constitution? So there is this pesky little issue of the deadline, and of course, the political will of major political party leaders who've always been slow on progress on women's rights, on queer rights, on trans rights, etc. So as of right now, we know that the ERA has been ratified. We know that there are people that will come to us with issue of the procedural hurdle and removing the deadline so that it can formally be published into the Constitution. And what we're going to do right now with this campaign is we're going to urge Congress to remove that deadline. But most importantly, we're going to make sure that President Biden knows, POTUS knows, the executive branch knows that the ERA has been duly ratified, and it is up to the president right now to certify those ratifications and actually publish the ERA into the Constitution. So that's essentially what the Equal Rights Amendment is. A common misconception about the ERA is, oh, sex equality is already guaranteed in the Constitution with the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. That is not true. If that was true, we wouldn't be fighting for abortion rights today at the constitutional level. We wouldn't be fighting for trans rights today at the constitutional level. We wouldn't be fighting for queer rights today at the constitutional level. That is exactly why we need an Equal Rights Amendment, because we know that the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause that typically protects against race discrimination, religious discrimination, etc., does not include sex. And SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, has been very wishy-washy when it comes to women's rights and queer rights and beyond. And we know that with very recent Supreme Court cases, the Supreme Court is gutting the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause as we speak. We not only need the Equal Rights Amendment, we need our movement's Equal Rights Amendment. We need the Equal Rights Amendment that today's feminist movement is envisioning it to protect. We're not just talking about simple sex equality. We are talking about gender justice. We are talking about an ERA that protects trans people, that protects queer people, that protects women of color, that protects working class women, and every single person that is a gender minority in this movement. So that is a very brief explainer of what the ERA is, why it is not in the Constitution, and very simply what needs to be done to get it into the Constitution on a procedural, legislative, and policy level. And I can pass it off to Sophia to explain to you more explicitly what the ERA's protections would be for you guys in your everyday lives.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, give it up for Claudia in the chat because Claudia is amazing and YFP is amazing. I want to say a huge thank you for inviting us on here. Women's March has been such an important partner in this fight in really protecting our rights and protecting our communities. So really, really thankful for you for inviting this space, right? For this type of joint struggle, this collaboration, this movement building that we really, really need right now. So I'm Sophia Arman. I'm the co-director of the Feminist Front. We are trying to build young people into building our feminist futures together. Us and YFP have formed a really important youth front in the ERA movement. We are strong and ready and united, and we've been building this movement to this point, built on generations of feminists who have fought before us. What's really exciting, just like Claudia said, is we are at a moment where this is ripe, folks. Like, I just want to tell you, y'all, this has been generations coming, and we are actually the first generation where all requirements in this constitutional process have been met. So I say this because that matters for those of us who are thinking in this moment of a lot of grief, of a lot of fear, right? What do we do right now? And the reason why we're coming here to tell you that the ERA matters is because exactly what Claudia was saying is the protections. What does this offer right now? So the ERA very specifically will help us prevent what we know and even what we don't know is coming under Trump, right? Let's be real about it. This Republican Congress, even right now, has many of whom have voted against your right to basic contraception, right? This Republican Congress, Republican figures, Republican nominees that are currently coming up and about to be in the executive branch, right, have actually talked about we're not sure if women should have access, for example, to no-fault divorce, right? I'm saying this because this goes beyond even just the Dobbs decision, which devastated our communities and really actually resulted in people living or dying, right? Particularly women, particularly pregnant folks. We are talking about rolling us back in this next administration, potentially generations. We actually cannot even conceptualize, quite literally, the attacks that are coming. Project 2025 is enough to keep us up in our sleep. And I want to acknowledge that and validate that for people on this call. Because you came here for a reason, which is you know in your gut that we have to build against this and we need to unite with whatever tool possible. The tool that we have right now that is very important, thanks to generations of feminists who have fought for it, that is ripe for this moment, is the ERA. The ERA helps us get things not only like positive benefits like equal pay, right? Basic protections around sexual, gender, workplace harassment, right? Things like actually equality in healthcare, in insurance. I'm not kidding. You know who some of the biggest lobby groups who are against the ERA historically is large insurance companies who have been frauding people through gender discrimination, right? Big corporations who actually are not paying us as workers the same wage. These are the enemies of the ERA, and they have found deep buddies in this new administration. So we have positive benefits, but we also are really using the ERA as protections for ourselves. I say this very sincerely to this group of people, women, allies, queer folks who are on this call. The ERA is a lame duck strategy. It is something that we can do right now. As Claudia mentioned, it is quite literally the targets are Biden and potentially Congress to ensure Biden's actions are completely protected. But it's something that they can literally do and must do within the next month, within the lead up to this administration. I don't know how else to say it, but it is us pulling the emergency brake. It is the thing we have that will prevent as many possible attacks as possible that we know are coming down the line in the pipeline of this Trump administration. I'm fired up. I'm ready for ERA. We can't wait to keep talking to you about it because I'm in it.
Thank you all. I think our next question is just thinking about the urgency right now and why it's so critical for us to fight to get this published right now. Could you speak a little bit more to that, please?
I can speak to that. So I'm sure a lot of us know what, the election results were. But right now we're facing a Republican trifecta. President Trump, who is a fascist and a Republican and a right-wing conservative, is going to be taking over the presidency. And the Republican Party will have control over both chambers of Congress, the Senate and the House. Not even to mention the fact that there is a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Things are not looking very good for us right now in terms of our rights and our lives and our futures and our freedom, based off of which ideological and partisan forces are taking control of our governmental institutions. Right now, we're pursuing a lame duck strategy because as of right now, Democrats hold the Senate. Democrats hold the presidency. And we only need 4 Republican targets, lame duck GOP targets that we know are movable, to vote on the ERA and pass it in the House this session. We know that we have a majority in the Senate and we can get it done. And we know that once Congress removes the deadline, Biden will publish. And even if Congress doesn't remove the deadline, we know that ultimately the ERA has fulfilled all of its 2 required constitutional requirements in order to be an amendment, and Biden must publish. That is his mandate. That is why it is so urgent right now, based off of the political landscape that we're looking at for the future once Trump is inaugurated, but also the political landscape that we can work with right now based off of our advantages to get the ERA across the finish line. Trump's rise to a second presidency is no threat. He's tried to distance himself from Project 2025. We know that he cannot distance himself from Project 2025 when many of his aides and advisors were the principal authors of that plan to essentially destroy our lives. We know that President Trump won't be able to distance himself from Project 2025 simply because he doesn't want to when he comes into the Oval Office, but because he will have no choice to, because he will need that extra support and that extra strategy to carry out the comprehensive conservative Republican strategy plan that they have for America. Project 2025 essentially seeks to undermine the rights of transgender people everywhere. They want to deny gender affirming care to trans youth in particular. And we know that we're going to hear a very important Supreme Court case on that on December 4th. We know that Trump specifically put in conservative Supreme Court justices to gut Dobbs away, to essentially say that the Constitution says nothing about abortion, that abortion is not protected in the Constitution. And we know that he's not going to stop there, especially since that's what he did during his first presidency, and he will do worse in his second presidency. We cannot trust Republicans and conservatives when they say they don't want to pass a national abortion ban. They can and they will. So we have to make sure that we are putting every single safeguard in place that we can, that is comprehensive, and that is permanent, and that is concrete to protect against our most fundamental rights and freedoms. We know that executive orders from Biden right now are temporary and can simply be reversed once Trump comes into office. We know that federal laws ultimately can also be reversed once a major political party gets enough seats to reverse that law over the next few years. A constitutional amendment is the best chance that we have right now, given our political landscape and the risks that we face in our political future, in terms of making sure that we protect the rights and lives of trans people, of queer people, of women, any single person seeking abortion. The ERA is our best bet right now. And this is the exact opportune moment that we have to take advantage of that and act. And we have to put as much pressure as we can on these 21 GOP House targets that we have to flip. We only need 4 to get this to a vote on the House floor. We have the majority in the Senate. We can get it across the finish line. And President Biden, POTUS, will have to certify and publish. This is exactly why it is the right time. The risks are too high, and this is simply the best time we have to do it, especially with a lot of the fear, but also momentum and support that we have for protecting against a second Trump presidency.
Do you mind if I jump in for 1 sec too, to just add to this? I think, like Claudia said, it's one of the best parts about this is it's not only ripe, right? Because we have 38 states, which only happened in 2020. So our generation crossed us over that finish line, right? Decades of feminists got us here. But this is winnable. This is winnable in this moment. So if you're wondering what we should do, right? Or what we can really do to protect ourselves, the ERA is the way. We've been doing actions in the Capitol building and in DC, targeting Biden, targeting Congress. And when we were there, we were doing die-ins, in these offices and in DC. And we said, when democracy dies, women die. And that's the honest truth about it. It's really about protecting our lives. It's protecting our communities, protecting our families, and protecting generations to come. So I think the urgency folks should really validate within themselves. I think people feel it, right? And I think patriarchy tells us to gaslight ourselves and say that we got to wait for somebody to tell us what to do. We got to hope that the system holds for us instead of deciding that we are the answer we've been looking for. We're the people we've been waiting for. And the ERA is absolutely that fight. It's our fight that this generation needs to take up the mantle for in honor of all of our feminist ancestors that got here and all of the people yet to come. It's this moment.
Yeah, thank you for stressing that urgency, and thank you, Claudia. You both have shared a little bit about what strategy looks like and a little bit about campaign activities that you've been doing. I'd love to learn more about what that has looked like. Like, what are both of your organizations doing? What is the broader campaign focus right now? What are some of those strategies and tactics that you all are focused on?
Yeah, absolutely. Claudia, do you want to start or you want me to start?
You got it.
Okay. Um, so we're gonna try to drop some links in the chat. I apologize, I don't have access to the full chat to do that, but I'm gonna send it to our wonderful Women's March team so we can put it in there. But what you can do right now is you can join the hashtag ERA Now movement. So on every single platform, everywhere possible, we need you to do many, many, many things. We need you to be raising and elevating the call for the ERA right now. We need you to get involved in the ERA movement by going to publisheranow.org. We have upcoming actions on the 5th and on the 10th, both in DC on the 5th and the 10th, and on the 10th to do local actions, direct actions in cities across the country with us. PublishERANow.org also has the ability for you to send a letter immediately right now to Biden to tell him to publish, to direct the archivist to make the ERA a reality. And also because we want to extra protect ourselves, we are also targeting very key members of Congress to help force a vote within Congress as well. We, as young feminists, want to say we are covering all our bases, but most importantly, we know that Biden, with literally a phone call, he can pick up the phone right now, can publish this ERA and get this done. We want folks to make sure that they not only hear this information, but that they spread it from now until inauguration every single day. On every platform possible, we need people to talk about the ERA, to learn about the ERA, and most importantly, to get on the phone, to call Biden, to write Biden, to try to urge our key members of Congress that we're looking at to take immediate action on this right now. Like we said, we only have a very, very short window for this. We know Trump is an opponent to the ERA. It's not going to happen under him. So we need you to take action right now. Okay? Claudia, is there anything you want to add as well around our action calls?
I would say that if you can, come to December 5th. If you can, come to December 10th. Come to both if you absolutely can. If not, we understand that December 10th might be a little bit of an easier date since it's going to be on a weekend. But the truth is we need all hands on deck for us to pull this off. I understand that, some people have been talking about strategy versus, getting Congress to remove the deadline and getting, President Biden to publish. The truth is these are not opposing strategies. That is a very common misconception about the movement, that removing the deadline and getting Biden to publish are opposing strategies. They're not. If Congress doesn't remove the deadline, this campaign and every single one of our partners will be pressuring President Biden to publish, as we've been doing since the ERA was ratified by Virginia in 2020. The fact of the matter is, on November 20th, Young Feminist Party and the Feminist Front teamed up together with a bunch of ragtag organizers to see what kind of pressure and movement that we could get on these House GOP targets to actually remove the deadline. We realized that not enough sufficient pressure had been put on them in the past, and we realized that these were movable targets. The reason why we're pursuing this dual-pronged strategy, in essence, is because removing the deadline essentially just gives more legitimacy to the ERA when it does get published by President Biden. And we will get it published. We will win this fight because we have to win this fight, because it is about our lives and our futures. We want to make sure that we cover all of our bases. We will be pressuring Biden to certify and publish. And because we have the resources and the capacity to do so, we're going to make sure that we get Congress on board. We want to make sure that we get as much support across the board from the people, from the masses, from every single branch of Congress, to make sure that when we get the ERA published, no one's going to try and take it down. We want to build a strong defense and case for the ERA once it gets published, to make sure that it is effective in protecting our rights and our freedoms. And I know a lot of people are talking about it in the chat. So that's kind of like my last piece that I wanted to say. But I've been in this movement for just a couple of years. I'm a very young person, and I have found so much joy and so much spirit and so much motivation in this movement and from all of its wonderful organizers. And if you guys can make it for December 5th on Capitol Hill and December 10th to do a walkout or a strike in your local community, whether that is your workplace, whether that is your school, or if you can even join us in DC for a shutdown, we want to see you there. We want to see you there.
Yay. Thank you both so much for that enlightening conversation. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, I think we should move on to Q&A with the time that we have left. And I want to remind folks, participants, please drop your questions in the Q&A box. The chat gets very clogged and crowded real quick. So we may not catch everything that you're posting in the chat. I do have a few questions that I saw while y'all were talking that I can start off with. The first one is, how would the ERA have protected us from SCOTUS overturning Dobbs?
Why do you want me to go?
You can take it.
Yeah, well, I think one of the, I'm gonna say this actually as just a young person of reproductive age in this country. Is that okay? Can I take my hat off and needed to have all the perfect answers for a second because I want to have really like a heart to heart with everybody on this call. Um, when Dobbs went down, many of us in both the Feminist Front and Young Feminist Party, right, were in kind of frontline organizing around how do we get people abortion care, right? And a lot of people are our age. They're of reproductive age. They're in their teens, they're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, 40s, etc. And I'll never forget that there was a teenage Latina woman that I met in Arizona when we essentially did a kind of Freedom Summer style um, organizing summer where we helped bus in young organizers from across surrounding states to basically ask what Arizona folks needed on the ground after the ban came down on Arizona. And I met this woman and she just like straight up told me directly to my face, teenager, hadn't been through the early ERA fight, the early fight for Roe, right? Like was of this generation and was like, I literally need to get an abortion now and I don't know what to do. And I think the reality is this is our new reality everywhere. And we keep getting headlines every single day about people who could have still been here on Earth. So I want to say that the ERA protects Dobbs in a technical way. It helps prevent sex-based discrimination from your government, period, end of story, including from your states. It is to make it the law of the land. So it won't matter who the hell is elected in your state legislature. They'll have to follow the Constitution because finally, women and queer people will be considered full citizens, which that's what this is really about. What this is really about is that this country does not consider many of the communities that live here as full human beings. We know in many ways that the ERA is not liberation. But to say that the 14th Amendment did not change things for people in this country, or the 19th, or any of these constitutional amendments would be a damn lie. We know that the ERA quite literally can help us save access to basic health care. We even believe it could be a divest invest strategy around moving, money away from like ongoing systems of policing and harm and destruction into communities around care, right, and investment and possibly generational reparations, Black maternal health. There are so many ways that the ERA can help us. And Dobbs actually showed us a really, really, really scary foreshadowing of what's to come, if I'm going to be honest. Because actually, explicitly in Dobbs, it said, you guys are not covered under the Constitution, period, end of story. It actually made the argument that we are afraid will happen under Trump multiple, multiple times, which is that what currently exists in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in these amendments, does not actually cover us. I'm saying this because coming up on this, what we know is that we cannot have our rights dictated by whatever the political whim of whatever man is in power or whatever men are in power on the Supreme Court or in Congress or in the executive branch. And I say this because this country just got out of an election where they could not elect a woman and yet is about to roll back quite a lot of rights for millions of women and queer people in this country. Dobbs is a direct response for us not being protected in this country and us not receiving full citizenship in this country. The ERA is one of many answers to this, but it is a strong one of the strongest ones we have in this political moment.
That was awesome, Sophia. And I also want to add on to there, we don't have to theorize about whether or not the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, will protect abortion. It has already proven that it can protect abortion. We all know that states have their own state constitutions and their own state laws regarding abortion access. And we've seen that even in the most conservative states, state level ERAs in Idaho, in Utah, and Pennsylvania have successfully blocked against abortion bans and restrictions on the basis of their ERA. And I'm talking simple sex state level ERA. It didn't even explicitly mention abortion on account of sex, on the basis of sex, has been enough to protect abortion in these states. And we know that any competent Supreme Court, including the very conservative justices that we have on the federal Supreme Court right now, wouldn't see any other choice. The ERA can protect abortion.
Amazing. Thank you both for those incredible answers. We have lots more questions coming in. Next question I'd like for y'all to answer is, who are the most likely Republicans in the Senate to vote affirmatively for the ERA? You all are familiar with who those folks are.
Senate, you said? Does it say Senate? I just want to.
Yes, Republicans in the Senate. Sorry.
Claudia, do you want to take this one? So I mean, there's a poetic justice to this. I don't know, Claudia, do you want to talk about it or you want me to? You go.
Yeah, I can talk about it. So I think a lot of you guys, I think some people are probably thinking about the filibuster exception, that a lot of bills need to pass Congress, or just like the filibuster in general. It requires more than a simple majority in order to get a lot of bills passed through Congress. What's very special about the Equal Rights Amendment in particular is that it triggers a specific requirement because the ERA deadline removal resolution pertains to matters of the Constitution. It's an Article 5 matter. Article 5 matter directly relates to, the constitutional amendment process. So essentially, the Rules Committee can decide on whether or not removing the deadline on the ERA would or would not be subject to a filibuster exception. And we know that it wouldn't be subject to the filibuster because it's an Article 5 piece of legislation relating directly to the constitutional amendment process. It only needs a simple majority. We know that Senate Dems hold the Senate. We know that we have that simple majority. So we don't actually need as many Republicans as some people may think that we do in order to get the ERA across the finish line in both chambers of Congress. And I would just like to reiterate, even if we do not get Congress, we're certainly going to put the pressure on Biden to get the ERA in the Constitution. But even just thinking of Senate Republicans that would vote in favor of the ERA, I think the two most evident that come to mind would be Senators Murkowski and Collins. Those are the two Republican senators, I would say, that would vote in favor of it and have shown support for those ERA resolutions and bills in the past.
I also want to say we love the poetic justice of the vice president potentially coming down. Think about it on the ERA. I really want us to think about it, about Kamala Harris getting to help women also in that way. So we're here. We're here for the full fight. But what we're telling you is this is the time. We just need you to help us apply pressure.
Thank you all. The next question that's coming up is how does asking Merrick Garland to overturn the deadline factor in here?
Can you repeat that one more time?
There was a question saying I saw an action asking Merrick Garland to overturn Bill Barr's deadline. How does this factor in?
I think I can take this one possibly.
Yeah.
I would say I'm also a research assistant at Columbia Law School's Equal Rights Amendment project. And right now, I would say that the two most foremost legal issues in terms of the legitimacy and validity of the ERA are just number one, the issue of the arbitrary deadline, and also the fact that it's met the Article 5 requirements in order to be an amendment. Biden, the president, can just immediately certify and publish. I'm not sure what Merrick Garland would have to do in that process, other than the fact that he is under the purview of the executive branch. But I would say right now, like the vast majority of movement leaders and legal scholars understand that we have two paths to getting the ERA across the finish line, and that is immediate publication and deadline removal. I would probably say that in terms of the most immediate, I would say in terms of one of the most contentious hurdles of getting the ERA across the finish line would be whether or not we put any pressure on Congress to remove the deadline. Everyone in this campaign, including myself, including Sophia, all of the organizers that we've been working with for years and the legal scholars that we've partnered with understand that Biden can pursue with immediate publication with or without Congress. The reason why we even pursue Congress as an avenue has to do with the legitimacy of the ERA and how well it can be defended after Biden publishes. There will undoubtedly be some litigation, especially from the far right, challenging the fact that Biden published it in the first place. We want to make sure that we're putting up all of our defenses that we can to enhance legitimacy of the ERA as being a part of our Constitution. And if getting Congress to remove the deadline, to formally remove the deadline, and getting President Biden to publish does that, then we're going to go for that. We have the capacity to do it. And that's not something people should overlook. And this campaign certainly isn't going to put any less pressure on Biden just because we're also putting pressure on Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say again that Biden can pick up the phone right now. We have sent thousands and thousands and thousands of letters in the last actually like 5 days. Much so thanks to movement partners who are really moving into this ERA space. I want to say it's been wonderful to see folks within racial justice, within climate justice, within immigrant justice, within the Black liberation struggle in this country, like really embrace ERA right now. That feels very, very important, is to focus on what we're trying to do together. So it's an amazing fight. It's a really important time and it's winnable, folks. We just need it to happen.
Thank you all. We have a couple more questions. There looks like there's some concern from folks in the chat regarding how this could potentially trigger an injunction from Trump's administration. Is that a concern? Is it something that you're hearing about in this movement space? And if so, how is that concern being addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely a diverse there's diverse strategy, but I think the important point is to say that we can apply pressure at both times in both scenarios. So Biden can do this publication right now, and his ability or his inability or his unwillingness to move right now is why we also need to force his hand in multiple ways. Part of forcing his hand in multiple ways is using every toolbox that we can. This president could have done this over the last several years, to be honest. And now we are at a time where nobody, whether in this beautiful, wonderful room today or, around this country, can actually look in a crystal ball and tell us what Trump is going to do. He has threatened, for example, to actually be here for a third term. I think part of what we really know is that we ultimately need to forward as much protection as possible using what we have immediately. And I think that's an honest answer. And I actually believe in movement work because I come from a space of really a lot of community issues that often have very little resources and very little time and very little, access to real institutional power, that we have to be united in our voice to say that this is what we want right now. Because I want to be very honest, the future that is up against us, that is coming towards us, requires us to build mass amounts of people power and bring people into this movement very quickly right now. And I say it in my deep heart. So don't you worry about it. We got decades and actually hundreds of legal scholars on it. We have constitutional lawyers. We have folks actually on both sides of the aisle. We have young folks. We have elderly folks. This is the first time in a long time that this movement has been this intersectional. It is being led by Black women and Black queer people. It is being led by young people. And it looks very different than at different points in this country's history. And so part of what we need to do is really affirm this loud and clear. We're not policymakers. It's not our job, to be honest, to be policymakers, but it is our job to demand that we want the ERA. That's the most important thing for us to say right now.
Sophia, you mentioned, that Biden had the opportunity to implement this over the past few years. And a question that's coming up is, what is stopping him? What has stopped him all this time? Why does this continue to seem like such an insurmountable task?
Yeah, I'm going to say it, and then I would love to hear what Claudia has to say too, because I think we have just like really beautiful, like movement folks in this space together. And it's rare that honestly we get to talk about these things. I'm going to be very honest with you. This administration has lacked the political will to really be on the offense and even at times on the defense of women and queer folks. And it's an honest assessment, right? I'm being very real about it. I think part of what we have seen about our opposition is that they are willing to do absolutely anything and everything, right, to really take us back in history. We are looking at some, what I can only describe, because I also come from a family that, escaped genocide and watched, the crumbling of infrastructure and the attacks on civil society and the attacks on journalism. And I think people really need to recognize what authoritarianism looks like as it grows in front of us. And I'm saying this because authoritarianism is also often a popular movement. It also is often supported by millions of people who elect people who are strongmen and authoritarians who come to power and rapidly undo people's basic fundamental human rights. So if we're going to talk about the stakes, we know as people in this country, like millions of us know that those are the stakes. People are hurting right now, economically, socially, in so many ways. And Biden really needs to hear, to be honest, from a united feminist movement in this country that needs to dig deep and think about who's most impacted, that this is what we want from all of us. And I want to say I'm really proud of the Young Feminist Party and the way that Women's March and so many movement organizations have refused to stop fighting to actually build an expansive feminist movement in this country. But we have a long way to go. We have a very long way to go. And I'm not saying that just for this moment. I'm saying that we have to fortify feminist organizations, feminist movement, and people into feminist political homes in a very real way in the next few months. and it's a rapid response type of reality. So Biden is reluctant because Biden has not always been on our team. And I want to be very honest about it, because part of what we have to do is push him. And we don't need to sit here and think about that only our electeds have all the power. We have the power as people. We are in the millions who support the ERA. The ERA is actually supported overwhelmingly by overwhelming majority of residents of the United States. Overwhelmingly. It has historically been a bipartisan issue. And part of the reason why you're seeing some of the blocks today is because they know that this would protect us from so many things that just a small group of elite people are trying to do with you and ours lives and bodies and rights and who we love and the families that we create. Very basic things. They're upset at the progress we made. They're trying to bring us back. There is a backlash to the ways that we have moved forward. And I say this as somebody who's very young and didn't even fight for those things because I wasn't alive, but I can see it too. We see it too. So those are the stakes. We need unity right now, principled unity. We need us to shout ERA as loud as possible until Biden hears it. That's on us to do together at this moment.
Claudia, do you have anything to add here?
No, I mean, I would just reaffirm what Sophia said. Our institutions and our elected leaders are lacking the political will. I'd probably say on the movement side, we have to focus on building political unity when it comes to taking action on the ERA. There is no single person in this movement, no reputable person at least, who disagrees on putting as much pressure as we can on President Biden to immediately publish the Equal Rights Amendment. We know that bringing in Congress, because of what we saw on November 20th with our disruptive actions in their offices, means that we may be able to get their support. And because of the swell of momentum that we've had, especially after the election, we know that we are more than capable of pursuing both actions and both points of pressure. The bottom line is we have to throw down. There are too many people that think that the Equal Rights Amendment died with its deadline in the 1980s. That is not true. Our fight for constitutional equality did not die decades ago. It is alive, it is strong, and it is well. And for us to win the Equal Rights Amendment, we can't be fighting within the movement in terms of the semantics of strategy, because the bottom line is we're going to put pressure on the people that we know we have to put pressure on. And that includes President Biden. That it is immediate publication. That is the bottom line. We have to settle our quarrels. We have to organize together. We have to build community. We have to win. Too much is at stake for us not to win.
Thank you, Claudia. We are quickly running out of time. I can't believe it's almost been an hour. I have a couple more questions that I would love if you all could answer. Someone asked, will the ERA help trans folks? And I know we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the call. I wonder if there's anything that you want to reiterate here about the protections for trans folks.
You want me to go, Claudia, or you want to go?
I got it.
Yes.
Okay. So, I know that some people have a few reservations about the ERA, especially if you're someone who's been hip to the ERA movement for a while. We know that in the 70s, the ERA movement became a bit exclusive and it focused primarily on the rights of middle class, upper class white women. But we know that the ERA has so much more legal power than that, and we know that it's shown it in very recent times at the state level, including with abortion. I will also say that even with a conservative court, even with this conservative Supreme Court that Trump made, in 2020, there is a trans rights case that came to the Supreme Court called Bostock v. Clayton County. And essentially, the court, the majority holding of the court essentially stated that discriminating against trans people is a form of sex discrimination. Now, when we conceptualize sex discrimination, and what that violates in the Constitution and what kind of remedies that triggers, well, we don't have an ERA. So we know that obviously our Constitution isn't doing enough. But we know that from the Bostock case, we've seen that even conservative Supreme Court justices have acknowledged that discriminating against trans people is a form of sex discrimination. Whether or not sex discrimination is actually prohibited in the Constitution remains to be seen. And that's why we need the Equal Rights Amendment. So that's why I feel confident about the ERA protecting trans rights if we win it. And we've also seen at the state level, there's definitely articles out there, especially on Ms. Magazine and Columbia Law School's ERA Project website, especially explaining cases in which state level ERAs have protected trans rights, especially in the context of trans athletes on the basis of sex discrimination and state level ERAs. So short answer, yes, the ERA does protect trans rights.
And I also want to say this because I think the siloing of our movements also doesn't really speak to our lives. Like a lot of trans folks need reproductive health care. A lot of trans folks are also women. They're trans women. A lot of folks who are women don't get or can't get abortions or aren't having children. A lot of women who, you know, I think part of what I really want us to remind ourselves is that our communities are deep and diverse and wonderful. And what's the best part about the ERA is actually the word women doesn't appear in it, to be honest. The word queer, trans doesn't. What it says is that we all, like all people, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So that covers literally all people. And I think that matters because what it means is it helps us fight fights that we don't even know are coming, like down the line, right? And very particularly people who are interested in building systems of oppression, right, are always inventing new ways, right, to do that. And so this is actually for all Americans. This is for all people in this country to quite literally not be discriminated by their own country. And I want to say this because most countries in the industrialized world have an equivalent of the ERA, and the United States does not. And we do not have an ERA at a time where we look to other countries. The United States looks to other countries and says they are failing, right, on women and queer rights, or that we should invade them because of women and queer rights, right? Yet we in our very own country cannot put us as communities into our very constitution, when many, many, many countries around the world have done this long ago. And so I think that should tell you how much we gain, we can gain. We have a lot to win from this. And so that is why people who are in power do not want it to happen and want us to be confused and divided and unorganized and unmobilized around the ERA.
Thank you all. We have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask one more question. Before I do so, there are a few questions about whether or not this will be recorded for folks who join later. Yes, this will be recorded and distributed. And I want to remind people, I don't like to have to do this. I made this announcement at the beginning. If I see any rude chat messages, we've had to disable the chat because of spam, but now I'm seeing some really disrespectful questions in the Q&A box. Not only will you be removed from this chat, like we're writing your name down, so you will not be able to join future conversations. Please stop and come correct. That is extremely disrespectful to the panelists that are here. With that being said, I would like to ask one more question. how do we keep going? This is a really good question. I appreciate the person who asked this. How do we keep going despite feeling numb and hopeless in the aftermath of the election? That's such a good question.
Sophie, you got it.
Okay, you know what? I love it because this is great. This is like a deep, real movement conversation. And um I think this is one of those fights where we can see on the horizon, right? This beautiful finish line that we have fought for so, so, so long in this country. Like people that we do not know, even people who were born way before folks are even alive today, and people who are yet to be born in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 generations will benefit from this. This is ripe because it turns our hopelessness into hope, into action. This is that moment to do that. It is truly, truly something. I've never seen such a wonderful coalescing of so many parts of this country truly come out in this moment that is about digging deep. And instead of us succumbing to despair, deciding that we're choosing hope, not because it's easy, not because there's not a lot of work to do, but because we're here to win and we're here to protect each other and we're here to love each other. We always say this in YFP and the FF, but organizing is really the highest expression of love. It's about caring for your neighbor and people you don't know and people who are yet to come. So we never give up. They call it the struggle for a reason, folks. I just want to be honest. It's always been hard. But in these moments, we really show who we are. We show the leaders that are willing to step up, not just in moments of comfort and when it's easy, but when it's a crisis. It is this moment where we see where we need to go by listening, especially to people who are deeply impacted. I don't think it's a coincidence that the ERA in this moment is being embraced by young folks. It's being embraced by BIPOC women and queer and trans people. I don't think it's a coincidence that folks from the working class are looking to the ERA in this moment. I don't think it's a coincidence that folks are making connections from reproductive justice to trans justice to the ERA. I think that is very, very deliberate and beautiful. And part of what that intersectionality actually means is not only that we can win, but that we're in it with each other, no matter what. So this is the moment to take whatever pain or grief, or confusion or anger that you are feeling, right? And to channel it into action. And that action just means organizing together. Collectivity is the way that we outpower these people in power. We might not have the money, we might not have the resources, but we have the people. So we need you to join our actions, Claudia, right? Say it with me. We need you to get on the action links.
We need you to get on the
We
action
need you
links
to get on the
right
action.
now.
Get on the action links right now. Support and uplift the ERA. Get on the publisheranow.org website. Everything you need is right there. We also, if you can't come with us to DC, or let's say, are somewhere that you can't be at an action with us, you can help fund young feminists to come out with us. We have a donation link that you can join. We want you to amplify through our social media posts on every single platform. And we need you to call. We need you to call these policymakers. Let them know. Let Biden know that you care about the ERA. On every single platform, we need you seeing green. We need you to use the hashtag ERA now. Can you do that with us? Let's do it. I see it. I love it. I see the love. Thank you so much. This is the time for no fear.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. I've dropped those links again in the chat for folks, including the social media handles. So please plug in, help spread the word. I think I was wondering, Claudia and Sophia, if there are things like scripts for people who want to make phone calls to Congress to help apply some of that grassroots pressure, for people who want to email their friends and family to get them engaged on this issue. Is there a place where we can find a toolkit on that website?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the best parts about the ERA movement is there's over 200 actually organizations under this really wonderful umbrella. And so there's so many ways that you can get involved. The ERA Coalition and us, really important youth front of this ERA movement, have all these links for you. Just start at publisheranow.org. We are constantly also uplifting our partners. There are many, many actions that are happening in the next few months. We really, really need you not only to follow us, but to join us. So sign up at the links, okay? We got easy call scripts. We got easy one-clickable, send it to a letter, easy, no excuse. Takes not even a minute, under a minute.
Yeah, it's super fast, so please get it done. So that brings us to the end of our call. Real quick before we jump, I just want to let you all know about some of the upcoming programming that we have going on the Women's March front. We're having a women's protection team training in early December. Stay tuned for that announcement about that training soon. We will also be having our next mass organizing call on Thursday, December 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern to talk about building mutual aid networks. That's another really important topic and super timely. So please tune in for that. The registration will be released for that soon. And lastly, as many of you already know, the People's March will be taking place on January 18th, DC and nationwide, and we will be making an announcement and sharing more details about that beginning next week. So keep an eye out for that on our socials and in your inbox. And in the meantime, everybody have a good rest of your week. I'm not going to acknowledge that holiday, but if you have time off, enjoy that time off with your friends and family and eat good. Thank you all very much. Much love to everyone. Stay safe. And thank you so much to our panelists and Shauna, who has been helping with the Q&A features. Appreciate y'all.